Let us go to the first puzzle. Here are the threats. Bishop takes rook. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes queen. Rook takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are. Queen takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using queen takes queen. Pawn takes queen. Bishop takes rook. Bishop takes bishop. Rook takes knight. Another puzzle. Here are the threats. Knight takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes queen. Rook takes bishop. Here are checks in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen takes queen. Bishop takes queen. Knight to f3. Rook to e2. Knight takes bishop. Another puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to b5, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to a4, check. Answer to this puzzle is queen to e4. Knight to c6. Queen takes knight, check. Let's continue. The threats are knight takes pawn. Knight takes knight. Queen takes pawn, check. Here are the checks. Queen takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is queen takes pawn, check. King to h8. Queen takes rook, check. Rook takes queen. Knight to f7, check. King to g8. Knight takes queen. Another puzzle. Threats in this position are. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using king to d6. Queen to b4, check. c5. Queen to f4, check. Queen takes queen. Another one. The threats are queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn, check. Checks in puzzle position are. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to g4, check. Queen to g5, check. Bishop takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using queen to g4, check. King to f1. Queen to g2, check. King to e1. Queen to g1, check. Queen to f1. Bishop takes pawn, check. King to d1. Queen takes queen, check. Let's continue. The threats are pawn takes knight. Queen takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is pawn takes knight. Rook to f6. Queen to g4. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are rook takes rook. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Here are the checks. Queen to g4, check. Queen to g3, check. Queen to g2, check. Queen to h1, check. Queen to f2, check. Queen to f1, check. Queen to e3, check. Answer to this puzzle is queen to g3, check. King to h1. Queen takes pawn, check. King to g1. Queen to g3, check. Another puzzle. The threats are queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight, check. Queen takes bishop, check. Bishop takes knight, check. Rook takes rook. The checks are queen takes knight, check. Queen takes bishop, check. Bishop takes knight, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes rook. Knight takes queen. Bishop takes knight, check. King to d7. Bishop takes queen. Next, puzzle position vulnerabilities are queen takes pawn. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen takes rook, check. Knight to h3, check. The puzzle is solved using knight to h3, check. King to f1. Bishop to d3, check. King to e1. Knight takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes rook, check. One more. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are knight takes rook, check. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. The checks are knight takes rook, check. Knight to h5, check. Queen to g5, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook to d7, check. The puzzle is solved using rook to d6. f2, check. King to f1. Queen to a4. Knight takes rook, check. Queen takes knight. Queen to b2. Next puzzle, the threats are queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Here are checks in puzzle position. Queen to g8, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to g6, check. Queen to h5, check. Bishop to f5, check. Solution to the puzzle is bishop to f5, check. King to h8. Queen takes bishop. Another one, here are threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Here are the checks. Queen to e6, check. Queen takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using queen to g4, rook to c7, bishop takes rook, rook to e7, d6. One more, the threats are. There are no threats in this position. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Rook to g8, check. h3, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to a4. King to h3. Rook takes bishop. King takes pawn. Rook to d3. Next puzzle, here are the threats. Knight takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn, check. The checks are. Bishop takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is. Knight takes bishop. Rook takes rook. King takes rook. Rook takes knight. Bishop takes pawn, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in this position are. Knight takes knight. Queen takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is. Knight takes knight. Queen to h7, check. King to f8. Bishop to g6. Queen to a1, check. King to f2. Queen takes pawn, check. Next puzzle, the threats are. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is. King to b4. King to c2. King to a3. King to c3. a5. King to c2. King to a2. Next puzzle, threats in this position are. There are no threats in this position. Checks in this position are. Rook to e8, check. The best move in puzzle position is. Rook to e6. h5, check. King to g3. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are the threats. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using. King to f7. h3. King takes knight. Another puzzle. The threats are. Queen takes rook, check. Rook takes queen. Here are the checks. Queen to e6, check. Queen to e7, check. Queen takes rook, check. Knight to e5, check. The puzzle is solved using. Knight to e5, check. Queen takes knight. Pawn takes queen. Another puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes rook. Bishop takes rook. The checks are. Rook to a8, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to a8, check. Knight to e8. Bishop takes rook. King to g7. Bishop takes knight. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes rook. Rook takes bishop. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is. Rook takes rook. Bishop takes rook. Bishop to c4, check. Bishop takes bishop. Queen takes bishop, check. King to h8. Knight to f7, check. Rook takes knight. Queen takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are. Bishop takes pawn. Checks in this position are. Queen to g4, check. The best move in puzzle position is. Knight to g6. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes queen. Another puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using. Rook to g4. Rook to h2. Rook takes pawn, check. Next, let us look at threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is knight to b4. Pawn takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop. Knight takes queen, check. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.